Hello and welcome everyone. In this video we're going to talk about the Angular CLI. We're going to talk about what it is and how to use it. So the Angular CLI is a command line tool that makes it really easy for us to create Angular applications and serve them to our browser. It also has capabilities to generate pretty much anything that Angular provides, from components to services to pipes and directive, pretty much everything. So before we can use the Angular CLI, we just have to make sure that we have Node.js. So most of you watching this video probably already have Node.js, but if you don't, it's really easy. You just download the LTS, long-term support version, and you just execute the downloaded file. So to double check that we have the Node and npm installed properly, I can run node with the -v flag for version, and if it's installed properly, it will give me the version number. I can also do that with npm. Alright, so now we can go ahead and npm install the Angular CLI. Also notice there's an @ symbol right here. This is important because this is the new Angular CLI, and the old one I believe didn't have the @ symbol. So when we npm install it, we'll make sure that the @ symbol is there. So I'm going to come here and do npm install with the G flag for global at Angular CLI. So this will go ahead and download the Angular CLI for us so we can start using it. Alright, so now we have Angular installed. The command is ng, stands for Angular. So if I just execute that without any commands, that will give us a list of available commands. And we're interested in the new command. So it gives you a short description here. It says creates a new workspace and an initial Angular project. So suppose I'm not really sure what arguments does the new command accept, I can always do ng new with the help flag. And that's going to give you a list of all possible flags. So I can scroll up a little bit and see it accepts one argument, and that's the name. So it tells us that's the name of the new workspace and initial project. Alright, so sounds good to me. I'll do ng new, and I need to give it a name, so I'll call it Hello Angular. So it's going to ask us if we would like to use the Angular routing. We'll just say no for now, and it's going to give us a list of styling options. We'll just pick CSS. So it's going to go ahead and create all the files that we need. Alright, so now we should have our new Hello Angular application. I can do an ls to see it, and I can change directory to it, and I'll change directory to Hello Angular. So, and we can ls here. So you can open this directory Hello Angular from your favorite text editor. I use code, so I can do code and dot for the current directory. That's going to open code, Visual Studio Code. So on the left-hand side, you can see that we have the E2E directory, and that's your end-to-end tests. We have the node modules directory, which has all your dependencies. And we have the source app. So all our source code will go inside of source app. And they give you a default, we'll actually see it in a second when we run the application. There's also files like the getignore and tslint for linting configuration, and a readme, and a package JSON as well for listing your dependencies. So to run the application, let's see, we'll open the terminal. And the command is serve. So I'll do ng serve. So that's going to go ahead and compile all our code and serve it to the browser. So we can see at the bottom here, it tells us Angular Live Development Server is listening on localhost 4200. So I can go to my browser and navigate to localhost 4200. And I can see the that's like the default Angular application that it generates with some links to the documentation. So we're going to use the Angular, let me open up a new terminal. So let's see how we're going to use the Angular CLI to generate maybe another component. So I'll do ng, and the command is generate. So if I'm not sure what the generate command takes, I can always do the help flag. And then at the top, it tells you it takes one argument, and that's the semantic. And at the bottom, it has a list of possible semantics or available semantics you can use. So we're going to do ng, and instead of generate, you can actually just alias it with g. And I want to generate a component. So instead of typing in component, I can just type in C. That's the alias for component. And again, if I'm not sure, I can do the help, and it's going to tell us on the top that it needs a name. So that's the name of the component. So I can do ng generate component, and I'll give it the name first. And notice we don't need the word component in the name of the component because the Angular CLI does that for us. We'll see that in a second. All right, so notice it created a directory for us, and all the files related to that component is inside. But notice there's a typo in the first, and I actually intentionally made that typo to demonstrate that sometimes it's a good idea before we go ahead and execute a command to know what Angular CLI will create before it actually creates it, if that makes sense. So there's a command called the dry run. So let's do ng generate component, and we'll call it second. And I'll do the dry run, which is --dry-run, and you can just alias it with -d. So this is a really helpful command. What it will do is it's not going to create anything yet, but it's going to tell you what it's going to create. So you can look at the output and make sure there's no typo in the name, and make sure our component files are in the right place. And note, it tells you at the bottom, the dry run flag means no changes were made. All right, so post for my second component, I really don't want the CSS or the HTML files. Maybe the CSS is so small that I'm going to put it inside the component class, or maybe this component is not styled. For the HTML, same thing. Maybe the template HTML file is so small that I don't want a whole separate file for it. Same thing for unit testing. Maybe I really don't want the spec.ts for unit testing. So what I can do is I can do ng, g for generate, c for component, second, and then we'll do inline style. So inline style will not generate the CSS file, and it will put the styles array inside the component class, and we'll see that in a second. I can also use the inline template. So this will not generate the HTML file, but it will put the HTML template inside the component class, and we'll see that in a second. For the unit tests, I can do skip tests. So notice I'm still using the -d, the dry run flag, so no changes will be made, but it's just going to tell me what it's going to create. All right, so notice now it only creates one file. And notice that all these components, by default, they go in a dedicated directory off of the component name. So it's inside of source app second, right? And then second component TS. If I don't want it kind of nested in that structure for whatever reason, I can use the flat, so --flat flag. And notice now that the component.ts file is inside of app directly. It's not inside of another directory. Also note, it tells us that it's going to update source app app module.ts. So actually, let's run this command. All right, so now we have second component TS. We can take a look at it. Notice that the template is inside this file because we use the inline template flag. And the styles array is here too because we use the inline styles. And we don't have a unit test file. And if we open app modules, you can see that it actually included both the components we generated for us. So this is really nice, so you don't have to worry about all the wiring yourself. So you can also use these flags to create or to generate services and pipes, and we can actually demonstrate that really quickly. So I can do ng generate s for service, and I'll call it, maybe it's an authentication service. So I'll just call it auth. All right, so notice it created auth service.spec.ts because I didn't use the skip tests flag, and it created the auth service ts. So we can see them right here. So to quickly recap, we talked about what Angular CLI is, and we saw two commands. That's the new command and the generate command. And we looked at how we can use those commands with various flags to generate components and services. You can also use the generate command to create pipes and directive and pretty much anything that Angular provides. I hope this video was helpful, and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions or any suggestions for future videos.